talk to you about applying videography in the classroom and the curriculum. As you can tell, the video quality isn't as great because I'm using a webcam to record this. Integrating videography can be very exciting. It can be as complicated as a full production requiring scripts, actors, a director, all the camera crew involved, or it can be as simple as using a cell phone. And before I delve into the nuts and bolts of learning how to use videography, I'd like to discuss the technology. Well, back in the 80s and 90s, when camcorders were just entering homes as a luxury item, they were still outside the bounds of school budgets, so they weren't easily acquired. It wasn't until the digital revolution when digital cameras became cheaply available and using video finally became affordable and possible for most classrooms. And since about that time, the cameras have gotten faster, they offer more options, they've gotten smaller, memory has gotten bigger and cheaper, and even nowadays, most people carry a phone in their pocket and take video. So cost isn't a factor anymore. Many students nowadays have access to technology that was once the domain of Hollywood directors. Case in point would be a full-frame mirrorless camera that records in HD. Now, these full-frame cameras that can record HD rival what Hollywood was recently using at a fraction of the cost. And when I mean fraction of the cost, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars versus $5,000 for this. And of course, you have point-and-shoot cameras, which is what most people associate with a camera nowadays. And these really became popular at the turn of the digital revolution. They're still around. The video quality isn't bad. Light, pocketable, portable. In fact, most students have access to at least one of these at home. They're so ubiquitous, and very, very, very cheap. And finally, of course, you have cell phones. And of course, the quality just keeps improving with each generation. And you have cell phones that have a camera and a camera at the front. As you can see, there's my webcam. And of course, related to cell phones is tablets. They're just as ubiquitous. And they have usually one camera, and some will have two. The beauty about all this digital technology is you don't really have to worry about running out of film, out of tape, like you did back in the 80s and 90s. You just transfer whatever files you have onto a computer or to some other storage media, and you're set to go. Keep going and keep recording. The goal of integrating videography into the classroom doesn't stop at the tech itself. And the tech really shouldn't be what the teacher should focus on. You can spend an entire classroom, an entire year just learning the affordances of a given technology or a given camera. Rather, most classroom teachers, what they should focus on is the content of the material their students produce. Before we go any further, I would also like to mention something about software. While it's possible to record a video that requires no editing, the beauty of videography is that mistakes are welcomed because they can be edited out, a scene can be reshot, and the final product can have content that's coherent, accurate, sensible, and that reflects the material being taught or the material being explained. Now, this editing doesn't always happen in camera. It can happen on the computer. The software used for editing can be open source, which is often free, or extremely expensive and very professional. Again, the goal in integrating videography is not so much process as it is product and content. The following video will show you just the plethora of software that's available. Tracy, that's a great question. When would you use it? Well, let's start off with this. There are different reasons for using videography in the classroom. You can use it for assessment purposes, for instruction, for presentation of new material, for practice, for review, and of course, what most people associate with videography, for entertainment. Now, as a teacher, you can use it whenever you want. There are really no limits. If you want your students to report on a topic, a theme, research, they can record it and re-record it and edit it on the computer. If you want your students to tell a story, they could also do that. Again, you have to determine as a teacher when it would be most appropriate for your setting. Absolutely. There are times when other approaches are more appropriate to understanding a concept or learning new material. That's not to say that videography is inappropriate in itself, but a teacher has to decide what would be the most efficient way for her students to learn a particular objective. Absolutely. I can outline a few steps for you. According to Lim, Pellet, and Pellet, there are 5 basic steps to producing any video. These steps are not set in stone, but they can be used as guidelines in most video production. The step 1 they call development. This involves goal setting, team formation, idea development, and usually a rough draft. Step 2 they refer to as pre-production, and this involves a range of different skills and approaches. They like research, storyboarding, script writing, and of course things like editing the script, rehearsal, etc. And then their next step is production. This is when the actual filming takes place. The next step is post-production. This is where mistakes are edited out, sometimes even voiceover is done. And then the 5th and final step is distribution. This is where they're going to store and share the video. It could be with the world online, or it could be with the classroom on a local intranet. Absolutely, there are some issues that can come up. There can be, especially if there are privacy issues at play. Say, for example, a student places a video online and uses no privacy settings. Well, this video becomes available to the world, and this could lead to legal issues of consent. It's important for everyone to be on the same page and to have video privacy settings turned on when placing videos on social media. When using the local internet, these issues are less problematic. That's a great question, Tracy. This is where David McKinnon will be able to better answer. How do you assess a video that's produced for the classroom? Anytime.
All too often in education we find examples of content being driven by assessment, even though we know it should really be the other way around. The focus of the assessment should be on the content. To avoid the question, when am I ever going to use this in real life, you should provide your students with opportunities to engage in authentic tasks and assessments. We will expand on these ideas and present you with a rubric we developed. Criteria for design should include the following: a section that offers an ability to reward students who have constructed something themselves. There should also be an area to comment on their behavior during the task. For example, modeling the real-world behavior that would be essential. And finally, a section to reward students who demonstrate what they've learned and higher-order thinking skills. 5 important characteristics of assessments from the resource Creating Meaningful Performance Assessments include: have meaning and provide motivation for students, require higher order thinking skills, connect to the subject matter studied. Focus should be on the content as much as possible by not awarding too much of the assessment for skills involved in the digital video production. And it should be easy to understand for the students, so they know they're being judged fairly against their peers. Successful assessments are linked to topics covered in class, showing their connection to what was learned previously. Students should be aware of how they will be assessed before they begin their assignments. If you have a really good project from past classes, it can be highly motivating for students and can help clear up any misunderstandings of what's expected from them. The first rubric shown here is quite a detailed one. We think this might be a rubric used in the videography classroom, not necessarily one for the arts and humanities classroom. However, it gives us a good starting point, and we have used quite a few concepts from the rubric in creating our own one. The second rubric contains significantly less detail than the first one. This rubric appears to be one that is more applicable to one in our setting. This rubric was also used to inform us on a few important aspects of our own. The rubric we created has 4 sections: the script and storyboard section, which is just basically organizational skills, the production quality and techniques, their videography skills, a content section, and finally, the citation section. We believe this is a good balance between assessing their videography skills and looking at their content. In addition to the rubric just discussed, we also believe there should be room in the overall assessment for self-evaluation. A reflective component to a major project offers another opportunity for students to grow and learn something about themselves. The peer assessment is optional, as sometimes it can be met with conflict. A possible way to incorporate peer influence could be a vote at the end of the assignment, where students put in a vote for the project they believe was the best. In this case, it could be multiple categories. The winning student could get bonus marks.
What do you think are the most important factors in forming the construction of a digital video rubric?
One thing that stood out when reading the literature in quite a few of the articles was that content should be the most important factor in assessment. So part of the rubric is for videography skills such as lighting, sound, and how they're actually shooting video. But the majority of the assessment or of the rubric is actually based on content. So things like linking to the curriculum, which I think is important for students to know, to have those links to the curriculum, as well as the higher order thinking skills that should be important. So all of those things, like I said, should be important towards the content. As well, another aspect of the rubric that I wanted to point out was just instead of having the long lists of criteria within an individual section, where students aren't sure which part they got and which part they didn't, and often not just students, some teachers are actually unclear as to which category they fall in, if they got this one but they didn't get this one, and which criteria is more important. So by breaking down in an individual section different criteria and then assigning a number based on how well they perform that criteria, I think is important, so students can know where they went wrong, and then if you're doing the assignment again, they can see the progress as they get better.